I will be back for you.
Don't touch me like that. You don't get to just come back and... Her voice broke, not loud, not dramatic, just cut off, because his hand didn't move. It stayed right there, firm, steady, intentional, at the small of her back, not pulling her closer, but not letting her forget either. Saad's breath caught in her throat, shallow, uneven, like her body hadn't decided if it wanted to fight him off or lean into it. Say it. Dominic's voice was low, controlled, too calm for what this was. Say you don't feel anything when I touch you. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table behind her, knuckles faintly pale as she tried to ground herself. She swallowed, tried again. You shouldn't even be this close to me. A pause, small but heavy. Dominic tilted his head slightly, studying her like he wasn't just listening to her words, but everything she wasn't saying. Answer the question. His thumb shifted, just barely, a slow, almost absent movement against her back, and that tiny motion, it sent something sharp and sudden through her chest. Sade inhaled quickly, too quickly. Her eyes flickered up to his, and immediately regretted it, because he wasn't looking at her like before, not like the boy she used to dismiss with a soft laugh and a careless wave of her hand. No, this was different. There was patience in his gaze, confidence, and something else, something that had been waiting for years. You used to laugh at me, he said quietly, like I didn't know what I was feeling. Sade let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding, her voice coming out softer now. You were younger. What did you expect me to do? Another pause, this time longer. Dominic leaned in slightly, not enough to trap her, just enough. I expected you to remember. Saad shook her head quickly, like she was trying to clear something. Dangerous. Remember what? She asked. But her voice didn't carry the weight she wanted it to. Dominic didn't answer immediately. He just watched her, carefully, like he had all the time in the world. And that alone made her chest tighten. You're about to marry another man. His voice dropped slightly, not louder, just deeper. But your body still remembers me. Silence. Complete. Sade blinked once, then again. Her lips parted, but no words came out, because that wasn't something she could easily deny. You're out of line, she finally said. But even that came out thinner than she intended. Dominic exhaled slowly, almost like a quiet release he'd been holding back. And the first, he took a small step closer, not aggressive, not rushed, just certain. Then why are you still standing here? Her heart stumbled, just for a second, and that second felt louder than anything he could have said. Have you ever tried to forget someone? But somehow, in the quiet moments, in the spaces you don't talk about, they're still there, still in your thoughts, still in your reactions, still in the way your body responds before your mind can catch up. Sade's fingers curled slightly at her side, her nails pressing faintly into her palm, as if she needed something to hold on to. This doesn't change anything, she said quickly. Everything has already been decided. Dominic's gaze didn't shift, not even a little. By who? The question landed harder than it should have. She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than her answer ever could. My family, she replied after a moment. That's how things work. Well, he paused briefly, his eyes dropping to her lips for just a second before lifting again. That sounds like their decision. Another beat. And this? His hand pressed slightly more firmly against her back, not forceful, but enough to remind her he was still there. Does this feel like their decision too? Her breath hitched again, and this time she couldn't hide it, because this wasn't just about right or wrong anymore. It wasn't even about timing. It was about something much more difficult to control. The difference between what she was expected to feel and what she actually did. If you've ever been in a situation where your heart and your reality didn't match, where everything looked perfect on the outside, but something inside you just wouldn't settle, go ahead and like this video. It helps more than you know. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to choose between what was right and what felt right? Saad finally stepped back, just enough to break the contact, but not enough to steady herself. You need to stop this, she said, quieter now, not commanding, not sharp, just unsure. Dominic's hand slowly dropped to his side, but his eyes never left hers. I tried, he said. Simple? Honest. I gave you time. A pause. Then, but I'm not doing that anymore. Sade stared at him, not saying anything, not moving, just looking, like she was trying to find something familiar in his face. and struggling, because the boy she used to brush off so easily wasn't standing in front of her anymore. This man was different, steadier, sharper, certain in a way that didn't ask for permission. "You don't get to just walk back into my life and decide things have changed," she said, her voice low but firmer now. Dominic didn't react immediately, didn't interrupt. He just let her finish, let her hold on to whatever control she thought she still had. "Then, they didn't change for me." A small pause. "They changed because you feel it now." That hit, not loudly, but deep enough to make her chest tighten again. Sade shook her head quickly, stepping back another inch. "You're wrong." But even she didn't sound convinced. Dominic watched her for a moment longer, then took one slow step forward, closing the distance she had just created. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, and this time it wasn't resistance, it was something else, something softer, more dangerous. Dominic's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "I told you I'd come back." The words didn't rise, didn't need to. They settled between them, heavy, unavoidable, and suddenly it wasn't just a memory anymore. It was a promise, one she never took seriously until now. And the question is, what do you do when the person you once dismissed becomes the one person you can't ignore anymore? When the version of them you left behind comes back stronger, more powerful, and still looking at you like you were never an option, but the only choice. If you're new here, welcome to Miss Wink Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. And if you haven't already, take a second to subscribe, like, and comment where you are watching from, because stories like this, they don't just entertain you, they stay with you. Let's go back to where it all started, before the tension, before the return, before she ever had to question her own heart, back to the moment when he was just her younger brother's friend. Washington, D.C. didn't just raise Saad Clark, it shaped her. Not in the loud, chaotic way most people imagined when they thought of power cities, but in something quieter, more controlled, more deliberate. The kind of environment where every word, every gesture, every connection meant something. Her family home stood in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the city. Tall iron gates, perfectly trimmed hedges, a driveway that curved just enough to make arrivals feel intentional. Inside, everything had its place, and nothing ever felt out of line. Sade grew up in that order, in that silence, in that quiet expectation that you didn't just exist. You represented something. Legacy, reputation, control. From a young age, she understood things most children didn't have to think about. Which fork to use, when to speak, when not to, how to sit through conversations that weren't meant for her, but still somehow involved her future. Her mother used to say it often. Presentation is everything. Not once, not twice, but enough times that it stopped sounding like advice and started sounding like instruction. Sade learned early how to carry herself, how to walk into a room and hold attention without asking for it, how to smile just enough, speak just enough, reveal just enough, and still never fully belong to herself. There were no loud arguments in that house, no chaos, no visible cracks, just control, measured, consistent, unspoken, and somehow that made it harder to breathe sometimes. As she grew older, people noticed her, not just because she was beautiful, but because she was composed, put together in a way that made her seem untouchable. And her parents, they noticed that too. They didn't say it outright, but their expectations shifted subtly, gradually, until one day, it wasn't about who Sade was becoming. It was about what she could represent. She became more than a daughter, more than an individual. She became an asset. And the strange part, she didn't fight it. Not at first, because when you're raised in something like that, you don't always recognize it as pressure. You recognize it as normal. Saad adjusted her sleeve one evening in front of the mirror, smoothing out a fabric that was already perfect. Her reflection stared back at her, calm, polished, exactly what she was supposed to be. "This is fine," she murmured softly to herself, and for a moment, she almost believed it. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single moment where her parents sat her down and said, "This is your future." No, it came in pieces, conversations that sounded casual, but weren't, observations that felt harmless, until they started repeating, "You should spend more time at events like this." Her mother's voice was smooth, controlled, as she adjusted the bracelet on Sadi's wrist before they entered the ballroom. "These are the rooms where decisions are made." Said glanced at her reflection briefly. "I thought these were just social gatherings." Her mother smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, that depends on how you use them." The first time Said noticed it clearly was during a dinner. Long table, perfectly arranged settings, soft lighting, everything exactly where it should be. Her father sat at the head, reviewing something on his tablet before finally placing it down. "There's a man I'd like you to meet," he said, without looking up immediately. Saad paused mid-motion, her fork hovering slightly above her plate. "A man?" Her mother didn't react, didn't even look surprised. "He comes from a very respectable family," she added calmly. "Established, influential." Sade set her fork down slowly. "And why do I need to meet him?" That was when her father finally looked at her, not harshly, not aggressively, just firmly. "Because it's time you started thinking long-term." A pause settled over the table, heavy, unavoidable. Saad leaned back slightly in her chair. "I am thinking long-term." Her voice was controlled, careful. "But I didn't realize that included being introduced like a proposal." Her mother exhaled softly, not irritated, just patient. "No one is proposing anything right now," she said. "We're simply creating opportunities." Opportunities. That word stayed with her because it sounded good, harmless, even helpful. But the way it was used felt different. "What if I don't like him?" Saad asked after a moment. Her father picked up his glass, taking a slow sip before responding. "Then you'll learn to understand what matters." That answer sat wrong, not loud, not sharp, but deep enough to linger. Said's fingers tightened slightly under the table, hidden, controlled. "Does what I want matter at all?" This time, her father didn't respond immediately, and somehow that silence said more than anything else. "Well," her mother finally spoke, her tone softer now. "What you want should align with what's best for you." Saad looked between them, and in that moment, something became clear. This wasn't about feelings. It wasn't about connection. It wasn't even about happiness. It was about alignment, positioning, strategy, and she was right in the center of it. Saad let out a slow breath, her gaze dropping briefly to the untouched plate in front of her. "I see," she said quietly. But the truth was, she was only just beginning to. In Saad's home, nothing was ever called neglect. It had better names, stronger names, more acceptable ones. Structure, discipline, preparation. That was what her parents believed they were giving her, and maybe, in their own way, they were. But discipline, when it replaces warmth, feels different. Said couldn't remember the last time her mother hugged her without adjusting something at the same time. A sleeve, a strand of hair, a posture correction, even affection came with refinement. "You're slouching slightly," her mother said one afternoon, standing behind her as Saad reviewed notes at the dining table. Said straightened immediately. "Like this?" Her mother studied her for a second, then nodded. "Better." That was it. No smile, no warmth, just approval. Her father was even quieter, not cold, just distant in a way that made you question if you were doing enough to be seen. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. A look from him carried more weight than most words. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said once, after an event. Sade paused, waiting for something more, but nothing came, so she nodded. "Thank you," and that was the end of it. No one asked her how she felt, not after long nights, not after difficult conversations, not even after moments that clearly stayed with her longer than they should have, because feelings weren't the focus. Results were, and slowly, without realizing it, Saad adapted. She stopped expecting softness, stopped reaching for reassurance, stopped expressing anything that didn't serve a purpose. Her emotions didn't disappear. They just learned where they weren't welcome. One evening, standing alone in her room, she stared at her reflection again. Same calm face, same controlled expression, always composed, always ready. She tilted her head slightly, studying herself. "You're doing fine," she said under her breath, a quiet reassurance, practiced, familiar, because if no one else was going to say it, she had learned to say it for herself. Dinner in the Clark household was never just dinner. It was routine, expectation, a space where things were said carefully, or not at all. That night felt no different at first. Everything in place, everything controlled, until It wasn't. I don't think I want to move forward with this. Said's voice cut through the quiet, not loud, but clear enough to shift the room. Her mother's fork paused mid-air. Her father didn't react immediately. He simply placed his glass down, gently, deliberately. Explain, he said. No anger, no surprise, just expectation. Said sat a little straighter. I've met him. I've spoken to him. A brief pause, and I don't feel anything. There it was, simple, honest, and for a moment the room held it. Her mother set her fork down neatly. Said, she began, her tone calm. You're not supposed to feel anything immediately. Said blinked once. That's exactly the problem. Her father finally looked at her fully now. Go on. She hesitated for a second. Just one. Then, I don't want to build a life based on something that feels empty. The word lingered. Uncomfortable. Real. Her father leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her. Not dismissive. Not yet. But already deciding something. What you're describing, he said slowly, is idealistic. Said's fingers tightened slightly against her lap, under the table. It's realistic, she replied. A beat. People should actually want the person they're committing to. Silence. Thicker this time. Her father exhaled lightly. Not frustrated, just resolved. What you want, he said, is not always what's necessary. That landed harder than before. Said's gaze dropped briefly to the table, then back up. And who decides what's necessary? Another pause, and this one felt final. Her father didn't hesitate. I did. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled. Firm, unshaken. Sade didn't speak again immediately, didn't argue, didn't push, because something about the way he said it made it clear. This wasn't a discussion. She inhaled slowly, her shoulders rising just slightly before settling again. Understood, she said. Quiet, controlled, exactly how she had been taught. But beneath that calm surface, something had shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to make her question how much of her life had already been decided for her. Perfection, in Said's world, wasn't optional. It was expected. It showed up in the smallest things. The way she walked into a room, never rushed, never uncertain. The way she spoke, measured, clear, never too emotional. The way she carried herself, even when no one was watching, especially when no one was watching. Her mother stood behind her now, adjusting the delicate clasp of a necklace resting against Said's collarbone. Not too much, she murmured. You don't want to look like you're trying. Sade held still, her eyes fixed on the mirror ahead. I'm not trying, she replied softly. Her mother's hands paused for just a second, then resumed. Good, she said, because trying meant uncertainty, and uncertainty was not something the Clark name allowed. Tonight matters, her mother continued, smoothing down the fabric of Saad's dress, even though there was nothing wrong with it. The right impression can open doors that take years to reach otherwise. Saad nodded faintly. I understand. And she did. That was the part that made it harder to resist. The ballroom was already filled by the time they arrived. Low conversations, controlled laughter, people who looked like they belonged exactly where they stood. Saad moved through it effortlessly. Polished smile, steady presence. Every inch of her exactly what she had been raised to be, until, there she is. Her father's voice came from just ahead, calm but purposeful. Said's gaze lifted, and that was when she saw him. Victor Hallicrest. He stood beside her father like he had always been part of the picture, tall, impeccably dressed, every detail about him precise, intentional. There was nothing careless about the way he carried himself, nothing uncertain. Sade, her father said, turning slightly toward her. This is Victor. Victor's eyes met hers, sharp, observant, not intrusive, but not warm either. It's a pleasure, he said, extending his hand. His voice was smooth, controlled, almost practiced. Said placed her hand in his. Nice to meet you. His grip was firm, not overpowering, just measured, like everything else about him. For a moment he didn't let go, not long enough to draw attention, but long enough to be noticed. You carry yourself well, he said, his gaze holding hers just a second longer than necessary. It's rare, a compliment, technically, but it didn't feel like one. Thank you, Sade replied, gently pulling her hand back. Victor's expression didn't change, not even slightly. We've heard a lot about you. her mother added, stepping in smoothly. Victor inclined his head. I hope only good things. Her father gave a small nod. Only what matters. There it was again, that word, matters. The conversation continued. Business, connections, future plans, all spoken in that same controlled tone Sade had grown up around. Victor spoke with ease, confident, direct, but there was something in the way he listened that made it clear. He wasn't just participating, he was assessing. Sade felt it. The way his attention lingered just enough. The way his questions weren't random, but specific, targeted. And what is it you want, Sade? He asked at one point. His voice even. The question should have been simple, easy, but something about it wasn't. She held his gaze, just for a second, long enough to recognize what he was really asking. Not curiosity, not interest. Evaluation. Sade offered a small, composed smile. I think that's something I'm still defining. Victor nodded once, not disappointed, not impressed, just noting it. That can be refined, he said. Refined. The words settled in her chest, quiet, but heavy. Sade's fingers brushed lightly against the side of her dress, grounding herself as the conversation shifted again around her. And in that moment, she understood something clearly. This wasn't about connection, not really. This was alignment, strategy, placement, and Victor fit perfectly into that world. Sade inhaled slowly, her expression never breaking, her posture still flawless, her presence still exactly what it needed to be. Of course, she said softly, though no one had asked her anything, because on the outside, she was composed, untouched, exactly what they expected. But underneath, something felt off, not loud, not enough to disrupt anything, just enough to remind her this wasn't her choice. And somehow, that realization stayed with her longer than the conversation itself. Back then, Dominic Mercer wasn't someone Sade thought about, not seriously, not in any way that mattered. He was just there. Loud laughter echoing down the hallway, footsteps that didn't bother to be quiet, the occasional voice drifting in from her younger brother's room, arguing over something that sounded urgent to them, but meaningless to everyone else. Man, you cheated. I didn't cheat. You're just losing. You literally changed the rules halfway. Sad walked past the room without stopping, her expression unchanged, though the faintest hint of amusement touched her lips. Boys, always loud, always certain they were right. Dominic blended into that world easily, comfortable, unfiltered, completely different from everything Sade had been raised around. She noticed that first, not him, just the difference. One afternoon, she stepped into the kitchen, reaching for a glass as she moved with quiet familiarity through the space. The house was calm, orderly, exactly how it was supposed to be, until... Hey! The voice came from behind her, casual, unbothered. Sade turned slightly, and there he was, Dominic, leaning against the counter like he had every right to be there. You're blocking the fridge, he added, nodding toward where she stood. Sade blinked once, then stepped aside, without a word. He walked past her, opened the fridge, and grabbed a drink like this wasn't her space he was casually taking over. You're very comfortable, she said after a moment, her tone calm but edged with something light. Dominic glanced at her as he twisted the cap open. Should I not be? Sade tilted her head slightly. This isn't your house. He took a sip, then shrugged. I'm here enough. That answer should have been annoying, dismissive, but instead it was just simple. Sade turned back to the counter, pouring herself water. You're loud, she added, almost as an afterthought. Dominic smiled slightly. Yeah. I've been told. There was no apology in it, no attempt to adjust, and for some reason, that stood out. Sade picked up her glass, taking a small sip as she studied him for just a second longer than necessary. He didn't seem bothered by her presence, didn't try to impress her, didn't avoid her either. He just existed, and that was unfamiliar. Try not to break anything, she said lightly as she moved past him. Dominic let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh. No promises. Sade shook her head faintly as she walked away, unimpressed, unaffected, at least. That's what she told herself. Time didn't announce the change. It didn't come with a clear moment where everything suddenly felt different. It was slower than that, subtle, quiet enough to ignore if you wanted to. But Sade noticed It started with small things. The way Dominic's voice deepened slightly over time. The way his presence in a room didn't feel as scattered as before. The way he stopped trying to fill every silence and instead let them sit. One evening, Saad entered the living room, expecting it to be empty. It usually was at that hour. Her brother was out. Her parents were occupied. The house had settled into its usual quiet, but Dominic was there, sitting on the couch, not playing anything, not distracted, just there. He looked up when she walked in, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "You're here late," she said finally, her tone neutral as she set her bag down. Dominic nodded slightly. "Yeah." A pause. Then, waiting for him, Sade glanced toward the hallway briefly, then back at him. "He's not back yet." "I know." Another pause. Longer this time. Sade moved to sit in a chair across from him, crossing her legs with effortless composure. "You could have gone home." Dominic leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "I didn't feel like it." Something about the way he said that felt different. Not careless, not lazy, intentional. Said's eyes lingered on him for a second, then another, and she caught it, the way he was looking at her. Not in passing, not accidentally, directly. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, her voice calm, but sharper now. Dominic didn't look away. "Like what?" Saad let out a quiet breath through her nose. "You know what I mean." A brief silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, but not light either. Dominic leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, still watching her. "Maybe I'm just paying attention." That was new. Saad held his gaze, trying to read it, trying to place it somewhere familiar, but it didn't fit. "You didn't used to do that," she said. Dominic's expression shifted just a little. Not a smile, not serious, just something in between. People change. The words were simple, but they carried something under them. Something that didn't belong to the boy she had dismissed so easily before. Said looked away first, just briefly, but enough. And that was the moment. The shift didn't need to be announced, didn't need to be explained. It was just there now, and whether she acknowledged it or not, it had already started. She leaned back slightly in her seat, crossing her arms loosely as if to create distance that didn't quite exist. "You're still my brother's friend," she said. Dominic nodded once. "I know." But the way he said it didn't sound like agreement. It sounded like he wasn't planning to stay there. It was late. Not too late to be unusual, but late enough that the house had quieted into something softer. Saad stepped into the kitchen, barefoot, her movements slow, unhurried. The lights were dimmed slightly, just enough to see, just enough to think. She reached for a glass, her fingers brushing against the smooth surface as she exhaled quietly. The day had been long, measured, controlled, just like always. The fridge opened behind her, soft, unannounced. Said didn't turn immediately, but she knew. "You don't sleep?" Dominic's voice came from behind her, low, casual, but not careless. Saad poured water into her glass before answering. "I do." A pause, just not early. Dominic stepped further into the kitchen, closing the fridge with a quiet push. "Same." Sade turned slightly, leaning back against the counter, her glass resting lightly in her hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but it didn't feel empty. Dominic watched her, not openly staring, not trying to hide it either, just watching. Said noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. "You've been doing that more," she said, her tone even. Dominic didn't pretend not to understand. "Doing what?" Sade tilted her head slightly, looking at me. A brief silence followed. Not awkward, just direct. Dominic leaned against the counter across from her, mirroring her posture without realizing it. "Maybe I didn't think you'd notice before." That answer should have been light, easy to dismiss, but something about it wasn't. Said lifted her glass, taking a slow sip as her eyes stayed on him. "I always notice," she said quietly. Dominic's expression shifted just slightly. Not surprised, something else. "Then why didn't you say anything?" Said lowered her glass, her fingers tightening just a little around it. "Because it didn't matter." There it was, clear, controlled, placed exactly where she wanted it. But Dominic didn't step back from it, didn't soften. Instead, he pushed. "It matters now." The words didn't rise, didn't demand attention, but they held it. Said's breath slowed, just slightly. Her gaze didn't move from his. "And why is that?" she asked. Dominic didn't answer right away. He took a step closer, not enough to crowd her, but enough to shift the space between them. Because I'm not pretending anymore. That landed, quiet, but heavy. Sade straightened just a little, her back leaving the counter as she adjusted her stance, creating distance, even if it was small. You should, she said. Her voice was steady, but softer than before. Dominic shook his head once. No. Another pause, and this one felt different, not uncertain, certain. Sade looked at him for a second longer, then turned away slightly, placing her glass down on the counter with controlled precision. This is unnecessary, she said, but the truth was, it didn't feel unnecessary. That was the problem. Sade didn't leave, even after saying that, even after creating that small distance. She stayed, and Dominic noticed. You don't mean that, he said quietly. Sade turned back toward him immediately. I do. Dominic held her gaze, didn't look away, didn't hesitate. No, he said again, you don't. The certainty in his voice was new. Sade's brows pulled together slightly. You don't get to tell me what I mean. Dominic stepped closer. This time, there was no pretending it was accidental. I get to tell you what I see. That shifted something. Sade's breath caught just slightly, her fingers brushing against the edge of the counter behind her. What exactly do you think you see? She asked. Dominic didn't look away, not once. You notice me. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Sade blinked once, then let out a small breath. That's not. She stopped herself, shook her head slightly. That doesn't mean anything. Dominic tilted his head just a fraction. It means you're paying attention. Sade let out a quiet exhale, her patience thinning. You're my brother's friend, she said, firmer now. And you're younger than me. There it was. The line, clear, defined, safe. Dominic nodded slowly. I know. Paused. Then, I still like you. The words didn't rush out, didn't stumble. They landed exactly how he meant them to. Sade stared at him for a moment. She didn't react. Then, she laughed, soft, light, not cruel, but dismissive enough to create distance. Dominic. She shook her head slightly, her expression settling into something familiar, something controlled. You're sweet. That word sat between them, and something about it shifted the air. Dominic's jaw tightened just slightly. Not visibly, but enough. I'm serious, he said. Sade stepped away from the counter, moving past him with calm, measured steps. I know you think you are. He turned to follow her with his eyes. And you don't? She stopped, just for a second, then turned back slightly. I think you're confusing attention with something else. Dominic didn't respond immediately, didn't argue. He just looked at her, and that look wasn't boyish anymore. It wasn't unsure. It was steady. You're wrong. Sade held his gaze for a second, longer than she should have. Then she broke it. Go find someone your age, she said, her tone calm again, controlled, final. And just like that, she placed him back where he was supposed to be, safe, harmless, temporary. But as she walked away, her steps slowed slightly, just for a moment, and though she didn't turn back, something about the way he had looked at her stayed longer than she expected, longer than she wanted, and that was the part she didn't admit, not even to herself. It didn't happen in a single moment. There was no clear line where Sade suddenly realized something had changed. It was smaller than that, quieter, the kind of shift you only notice when it's already been happening for a while. At first it was just awareness, passing, unimportant, like noticing he had stopped laughing as loudly as before, or that he didn't interrupt conversations anymore. He listened. She saw it in fragments. The way he stood now, less restless. The way he spoke, more deliberate. The way people responded to him, differently. And somehow she kept noticing. One afternoon, she passed by the backyard, her steps slowing slightly when she saw him there. Dominic stood near the fence, talking to her brother, calm, focused, not trying to be the center of attention. Sade didn't stop, didn't make it obvious, but her gaze lingered, just for a second, longer than necessary. And that second became a pattern. She started catching things, unintentionally, or at least that's what she told herself. The way his eyes would find her in a room, not immediately, but eventually, like he knew she was there without needing to look right away. The way conversations shifted slightly when he spoke. Not louder, not forced, just grounded. Even the silence around him felt different now, not empty, not awkward, present. Sade noticed all of it, every small detail, every subtle change, and yet she never acknowledged it. not outwardly, not even in her own thoughts, because acknowledging it would mean giving it meaning, and that was something she wasn't ready to do. One evening, she stood by the staircase, halfway between going up and turning back, her fingers resting lightly against the railing. From where she stood, she could see into the living room. Dominic was there again, sitting, quiet. He looked up, like he felt it, like he knew she was there. Their eyes met, just for a moment. Sade held it, long enough to feel something shift in her chest. Then she looked away and continued up the stairs. Not fast, not rushed, but not slow enough to suggest she was thinking about it either. Later that night, as she sat alone in her room, her hands resting loosely in her lap, she let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It doesn't matter," she murmured to herself. The words were soft, controlled, familiar, but this time they didn't settle the way they were supposed to, because deep down, somewhere she hadn't fully faced yet, she knew she had noticed him, long before she allowed herself to admit it. And now, that awareness wasn't fading. It was waiting, quiet, patient, for the moment she wouldn't be able to ignore it anymore. The house felt different that night, not louder, not quieter, just aware, like something was about to change, and even the walls could feel it. Sade stood near the window in the living room, her arms loosely crossed, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. The lights outside cast a soft glow through the glass, familiar, unmoving. Everything looked the same, and yet it didn't feel the same. She had heard earlier, in passing, a conversation that wasn't meant for her, but reached her anyway. "He's leaving tomorrow." That was all it took. No details, no explanation. Just that Dominic was leaving. Sade exhaled slowly, her shoulders rising just slightly before settling again. She wasn't sure why that information had stayed with her the way it did. People left all the time, came and went, moved on. It wasn't unusual. So why did this feel different? Footsteps sounded behind her, steady, unhurried. She didn't turn immediately, but she knew. "You heard?" Dominic's voice, closer than she expected. Sade nodded once, still facing the window. "I did." A pause settled between them, not awkward, just present. "For how long?" she asked after a moment. Dominic stepped further into the room, stopping just behind her. "A while." That answer felt incomplete, but he didn't add to it. Sade finally turned, slowly. He looked the same, and not at all. "You didn't think to mention it?" she asked, her tone even. Dominic held her gaze. "I was going to." Sade tilted her head slightly. "When?" He didn't answer right away, and that silence said enough. "Right," she said softly, her lips pressing together briefly before relaxing again. The space between them felt smaller now, not physically, but something about it had shifted. "Where are you going?" she asked. Dominic glanced down for a second, then back up, out of state. For now, she repeated quietly. He nodded. That should have been enough. Simple, clear. But it wasn't. Sade looked at him for a moment, longer than necessary, like she was trying to understand something that hadn't been said yet. "Well," she started, then stopped briefly, her voice softening just a little. "I guess that's good for you." The words were right, appropriate, expected, but they didn't land the way she intended. Dominic noticed. Of course he did. "Yeah," he said, but there was no energy behind it, just acknowledgement. Another silence followed, longer this time. Neither of them moved, neither of them filled it, and somehow that made everything louder. Sade shifted slightly, her arms falling to her sides as if the position no longer felt right. "You'll probably like it," she added after a moment, her voice quieter now, something different. Dominic gave a small nod. "Maybe," but again, no real reaction. Sade frowned faintly, not visibly enough to draw attention, but enough that she felt it. "You don't sound sure." Dominic looked at her, really looked this time. "I'm not." That answer caught her off guard. "Then why go?" she asked. A pause, because there was an answer, but he didn't give it right away. "Because staying," he started, then stopped briefly, his jaw tightening just slightly before he continued, "wouldn't change anything." The words were quiet, but they landed. Sade held his gaze, something in her chest shifting, just slightly. "And leaving will?" she asked. Dominic didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, not enough to close the space completely, but enough to change it. "I don't know," he admitted, honest, simple, and somehow that made it harder to ignore. Sade's fingers brushed lightly against her arm, a small, unconscious movement, as she tried to steady something she couldn't quite name. "You'll figure it out," she said. That was what she was supposed to say. Encouraging, neutral, safe. Dominic's gaze didn't shift. Yeah, but again, it didn't sound like belief. Another pause. This one. Heavier. Sade's breath slowed. Her attention still fixed on him, even as her mind tried to pull back, to reset, to place this moment somewhere less significant. But it didn't move. "You should get some rest," she said finally. Her voice softer now, almost like she was trying to close the moment before it stretched any further. Dominic didn't move, didn't step away. "Yeah," he repeated, but neither of them left, because something about this wasn't finished yet, and they both knew it, even if neither of them said it out loud. The space between them felt fragile, like it only needed the smallest shift to become something else. Sade didn't move, didn't step back, but she didn't step forward either. She just stood there, aware of him in a way she hadn't allowed herself to be before. Dominic's gaze dropped briefly, not away, just lower, taking her in differently now, more carefully, more intentionally. Sade noticed, of course she did. Her breath slowed slightly, her fingers brushing lightly against the side of her arm again, like she needed something to ground her. "This doesn't have to be complicated," she said, though her voice lacked the certainty it usually carried. Dominic didn't respond right away. He took another step closer, this time, close enough that the distance between them felt deliberate, measured. Her chest rose a little deeper with her next breath. "You should probably—" She stopped, because his hand lifted, slowly, not rushed, not uncertain, just steady. Sade's eyes followed the movement, without meaning to, watched as his fingers hovered just inches away from her arm, close enough to touch, close enough to change everything. And for a second, she thought he would. She felt it coming, that shift, that line they hadn't crossed yet, but were standing right on. Her breath caught, just slightly. Dominic's hand lingered there, suspended in that space, like he was deciding something, like he was weighing it. And then he stopped. His fingers curled slightly before lowering back to his side. The moment passed, but not really, because it didn't disappear. It just stayed between them, unspoken, unresolved. Sade let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her gaze lifting back to his face. "Good," she said softly, though it sounded more like she was reassuring herself than him. Dominic's jaw tightened just slightly, but he didn't explain, didn't apologize, didn't pretend it hadn't happened, because it had, and they both knew it. The promise. Part 4. Eye contact holds too long. Emotional tension peaks. Neither of them moved after that, not immediately, not even to break the tension that had just settled between them. Sade should have stepped away, should have said something. Anything, to bring the moment back to something normal, but she didn't. Instead, she stayed, and so did he. Dominic looked at her again, not briefly, not in passing, but fully, like he wasn't just seeing her, but choosing to. Sade held his gaze, longer than she should have, long enough for something to shift again beneath the surface. "You're different," she said quietly. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Dominic didn't react with surprise, almost like he had been waiting for her to say it. "So are you?" Her brows pulled together slightly. "I haven't changed." He shook his head once, not on the outside, then, "But you notice more now." That landed deeper than she expected. Sade's lips parted slightly, but no immediate response followed, because there was truth in that, and she knew it. "I noticed before," she said after a moment, her voice softer now. Dominic stepped just a fraction closer. "I know." The way he said it wasn't dismissive, wasn't surprised. It was certain, and that certainty made it harder to deny. Sade's breath caught again, lighter this time, almost like her body was reacting before her thoughts could settle. "You're still leaving," she said, as if anchoring herself to something real, something stable. Dominic nodded. "Yeah," but his eyes didn't leave hers, not even for a second. And that was the problem, because if he had looked away, if he had broken it, this would have been easier, simpler, containable. But he didn't, and neither did she. And that silence between them, stretched, not empty, not uncertain, just full of everything neither of them had said yet. The silence didn't break. It deepened. Sade could feel it, that moment stretching between them, pulling tighter, waiting. Dominic's gaze didn't shift, not even slightly, like if he looked away, He'd lose something. Sade swallowed, her throat dry in a way that didn't make sense. "You should go," she said quietly, but there was no push behind it, no urgency. Dominic exhaled slowly, not frustrated, not hesitant, just steady. "I will." A pause, then, "But not like this." That made her look at him differently, more directly. "Like what?" she asked. Dominic took one last step closer, not enough to touch her, but enough that she felt it. "This," he said simply. The word didn't explain anything, but somehow it explained everything. Sade's fingers curled slightly at her side, her posture still composed even as something inside her shifted again. "You're overthinking this," she said. Though her voice had softened, Dominic shook his head once. "No, a beat. I've been thinking about this for a long time." That stilled her completely. For a second, Saad didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even try to redirect it, because something in the way he said that felt real, too real to dismiss immediately. Dominic held her gaze, and then, quietly, firmly, "I'll come back for you." The words settled between them, not dramatic, not rushed, certain. Saad blinked once, then again, and then she laughed, soft, light, the kind of laugh meant to make something serious feel smaller than it was. "Dominic." She shook her head slightly, her lips curving into that same familiar expression she always used when she wanted to put things back where they belonged. "You don't even know what that means." But her hand, resting lightly against her side, trembled, just a little, barely noticeable. Dominic saw it. He didn't react, didn't call it out, but he saw it. "I do," he said. Simple, no hesitation. Sade's smile faded just slightly, not completely, but enough. "You're leaving," she replied, her voice quieter now. "People say things like that when they leave." Dominic didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. "I'm not people." That lingered. Saad held his gaze again, longer this time, and for a moment, just a moment, she almost believed him, almost, but that moment passed, and she let it. "You should go," she said again, softer now, final. Dominic nodded. Once. This time, he stepped back, and that movement, that small shift of distance, felt bigger than it should have. He turned, walked toward the door, but just before he left, he paused, not turning back. "Don't forget," he said quietly. Then he was gone. The door closed softly behind him, and just like that, the moment ended. Sade stood there for a few seconds longer, still, composed, exactly as she always was. Then, slowly, she exhaled. "He's not serious," she murmured to herself. The words were familiar, safe, easy to believe, but something in her chest didn't settle, because deep down, beneath the control, beneath the logic, beneath everything she had been taught to prioritize, she felt it, not certainty, not belief, just something, and that something stayed long after he left, long after the house returned to its usual quiet, long after she told herself it didn't matter, because whether she believed him or not, that promise had already taken root. Years didn't pass loudly. They didn't announce themselves. They just moved, and with them, everything changed. Sade adjusted the sleeve of her dress as she stepped into the venue, her posture effortless, her expression composed in that same way she had mastered years ago. Nothing about her looked uncertain. Nothing about her ever did. The room was filled with familiar energy, low conversations, measured laughter, people who understood exactly how to carry themselves. She belonged here. She always had. But tonight, something felt slightly off. Not obvious, not enough to disrupt anything, just enough to be noticed. Her parents were already engaged in conversation across the room, her mother's posture flawless, her father's presence steady as always. Victor stood not too far from them, controlled, attentive, exactly where he was supposed to be. Everything was aligned, everything made sense, and yet Sade's attention drifted, not to anything specific, just searching. Then the shift happened. It wasn't loud, no announcement, no dramatic entrance, just a subtle change in the room, the kind that made people straighten slightly, pause mid-sentence, adjust without realizing why. Sade felt it before she saw it. Her gaze lifted, slowly, and then she did. Dominic, standing at the far end of the room, not the same, not even close. He didn't rush in, didn't try to claim attention. He didn't need to, because it followed him anyway. His suit was tailored perfectly, not flashy, not excessive, just precise. Every step he took was measured, calm, like he already knew where he belonged. And more importantly, like no one there could question it. Said's breath slowed, just slightly. This wasn't the boy she remembered, not the one who stood in her kitchen, not the one who looked at her like he was still figuring things out. This version of Dominic was certain, and that certainty felt different, dangerous. She didn't move, didn't approach, didn't react outwardly, but her eyes stayed on him, because something about the way he carried himself now made it impossible not to. The room adjusted around him, not obviously, not dramatically, just naturally. A man near the entrance stepped forward first, extending his hand with a polite smile. "Dominic, good to see you." Dominic shook his hand once, firm, brief. "You too?" No extra words, no forced politeness, but the man lingered a second longer than necessary, like he wanted to say more, but didn't. Another followed, then another, each interaction the same, respectful, measured. And Dominic, he didn't chase any of it, didn't lean into it. He accepted it, like it was expected. Said watched, carefully, the way people positioned themselves around him, the way conversations shifted slightly when he spoke, the way no one interrupted him, even when he wasn't saying much. That wasn't coincidence, that was influence, and he carried it, effortlessly. "Well," someone near her murmured quietly, not realizing she could hear. "He built something serious out there." Said's attention sharpened slightly. Built. So it was true. He hadn't just left. He had become something that changed the way rooms responded to him. Dominic moved further into the space, his presence steady, unhurried, and for a moment, he didn't look at her, not once, like he wasn't searching, wasn't anticipating, like he already knew. She was there, and that did something to her, something small, but noticeable. Her fingers brushed lightly against her wrist, a quiet, grounding motion, because, suddenly, this wasn't just memory anymore. This was real, present, and different, very different. The boy who once stood in her kitchen had walked back into her world as someone no longer easy to dismiss, and that realization settled deeper than she expected. For a while, he didn't look at her, not once, and that should have made it easier, should have allowed her to settle back into herself, into the version of control she had always relied on, but it didn't, because the absence of it, his attention, felt louder than if he had given it freely. Said kept her posture steady, her expression composed, her presence exactly what it needed to be, but her awareness, it stayed on him, tracking, waiting, without permission. Dominic moved through the room with the same quiet confidence, acknowledging conversations, responding when necessary, never lingering too long. And still, not once did his gaze shift toward her. Sade exhaled slowly, almost like she was resetting herself. "It doesn't matter," she murmured under her breath. But the words didn't land, not the way they were supposed to, because the truth was, it did more than she wanted it to. Then it happened, not dramatically, not suddenly, just inevitably. Dominic turned, and his eyes found hers, like they had always known where to go, like there had never been anywhere else worth looking. Everything else in the room faded, not visibly, not in a way anyone else would notice, but between them, it shifted completely. Sade didn't move, didn't look away. She couldn't, because the moment their eyes locked, something pulled tight in her chest, sharp, unfamiliar, unavoidable. There was no surprise in his expression, no hesitation, just recognition and something deeper beneath it, something that hadn't disappeared with time, something that had grown. The silence stretched, longer than it should have, long enough to become noticeable. If anyone had been paying attention, but no one was, because whatever was happening between them wasn't for anyone else. Sade's breath slowed, her fingers pressing lightly against the side of her dress as she held his gaze, trying to understand it, trying to place it somewhere logical, but it didn't fit, not anymore, because this wasn't the same Dominic she had once dismissed, and this wasn't the same version of herself that could do it so easily. He didn't look away, not once, and neither did she. And in that silence, without a single word spoken, everything they had left unresolved rose back to the surface. Time skip plus return. Part 4. Tension reignites. Controlled, sensual undercurrent plus CTA. Ish. Didn't change. The conversations didn't stop. Nothing around them shifted in any obvious way, and yet something had already started. Sade broke the eye contact first, not abruptly, not dramatically, just enough to breathe again, to think, to regain something that had slipped for a second too long. She turned slightly, her gaze lowering briefly as she reached for a glass nearby, her fingers steady even as her pulse hadn't fully settled. "You're fine," she told herself quietly, controlled, measured, familiar. But when she looked back up, he was closer, not beside her, not yet, but closer than before, and she hadn't seen him move. That alone sent something subtle through her, not fear, not discomfort, something else, something she didn't immediately name. Dominic stopped just within reach, close enough that his presence was no longer something she could observe from a distance. Now, she felt it, the weight of it, the awareness of him, the way the space shifted, simply because he was standing there. "You look the same," he said. His voice was calm, lower now, more controlled than she remembered, but there was something under it, something familiar. Sade turned fully toward him, her chin lifting slightly, her composure sliding back into place. "That's not what people usually say after years." Dominic's gaze moved over her briefly, not rushed, not careless, intentional. They usually don't pay attention. That wasn't just a statement. It was something else, something layered. Sade held his gaze, refusing to react too quickly. "Well," she replied, her tone even. "People change." A small pause, then, clearly. Dominic didn't deny it, didn't explain it either. "I did. Simple, certain." Sade's breath slowed again, her attention fixed on him in a way she couldn't quite pull back from. "And now you're back," she said. Not a question, not quite a statement either. Dominic's eyes didn't leave hers. "Yeah." A beat, just like I said. That hit, not loudly, but enough. Sade's fingers tightened slightly around the glass in her hand before relaxing again, because she remembered. Of course she did. She just hadn't expected it to feel like this, standing here, looking at him, seeing what he had become. "You kept your word," she said quietly. Dominic's expression didn't change. "I always do." The silence returned, not empty, not uncertain, just charged. And this time, Sade felt it fully, not as something distant, not as something easy to dismiss, but as something present, real, dangerously close. "So, tell me, at this point, would you give him a second chance? Or is it already too late? Drop your answer in the comments. Because it's only just getting started." Sade should have stepped away. That would have been the easiest thing to do. The most familiar. Create distance. Reset. Return everything to where it belonged. But she didn't. And Dominic noticed. Of course he did. He always noticed the way she stayed exactly where she was, even after the conversation should have ended. The way her fingers loosened slightly around the glass, instead of tightening. The way her eyes didn't leave his, even when she tried to appear unaffected. "You're still here," he said quietly. Not a question, just an observation. Sade tilted her head slightly, her expression composed. "So are you?" Dominic's gaze held hers, steady, unwavering. "Yeah." A pause. "But I came back for a reason." There it was again. Not the exact words from before, but close enough to reach into something she hadn't fully let go of. Sade exhaled slowly, setting the glass down beside her with controlled precision, like she needed her hands free, or maybe like she needed something to steady herself. "People usually come back for business," she said, her tone even, "or opportunity." Dominic didn't look away. "I have both." Simple, certain, and somehow that made it heavier, because it meant he didn't need anything. Not from this room, not from these people, not even from her. And yet, he was standing right in front of her. Sade's breath slowed again, her posture still flawless, her control still intact, but thinner now, just slightly. "Then what is it?" she asked. Dominic took a step closer, not rushed, not hesitant, measured, like every move had already been decided. "You." The word didn't rise, didn't demand attention, but it settled deep. Sade's lips parted slightly, her body going still for just a second too long. "You don't get to say things like that," she replied, her voice quieter now, not sharp, not dismissive, just careful. Dominic tilted his head slightly, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. "I already did." That sent something through her, quick, unsteady. Sade drew in a slow breath, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the table beside her, grounding herself again. "This isn't the same," she said. "You're not the same." Dominic nodded once. "I know." Another pause. "Then, that's the point." Silence followed. Not awkward, not uncertain, just full. Sade looked at him. Really looked this time. Taking in everything she hadn't allowed herself to before. The way he stood, the way he spoke, the way nothing about him felt like something she could easily place anymore. And that was the problem. Because before, he had been easy to define, easy to dismiss, easy to control. Now, he wasn't. And standing this close to him, feeling the weight of his presence, the steadiness of his attention, the quiet confidence in the way he held himself, Sade realized something she hadn't prepared for. "You changed more than I expected," she said softly. Dominic didn't react immediately, didn't smile, didn't soften. He just held her gaze, not in the ways that matter. That line lingered, because she understood it more than she wanted to. Sade swallowed lightly, her composure still in place, but no longer effortless. "You shouldn't be doing this," she said. But this time, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like recognition. Dominic stepped just a fraction closer, close enough that she could feel the shift in air between them. "I told you," he said quietly. "I'm not pretending anymore." And just like that, the space between them changed again. Not visibly, not loudly, but enough. Enough to make it clear this wasn't going to be something she could control the way she used to. And for the first time since he walked back into her world, Sade didn't try to step away. Not immediately, not instinctively. She just stayed right there, with him in it. And that was where everything truly began. The space between them didn't break. It held tight, unspoken. Sade was aware of everything now, not just him, but the way her body reacted to him being this close, the way her breathing had shifted, the way her focus refused to settle anywhere else. Dominic didn't move away, didn't try to close the distance further either. He just stayed, like he understood something she was still trying to figure out. "You're thinking too much," he said quietly. Sade let out a soft breath through her nose, her gaze steady on his. "That's usually what happens when things don't make sense." Dominic tilted his head slightly. "It makes sense." She shook her head once. "No, it doesn't." "Then you leave. You come back like this. And you expect—" She stopped, cut herself off, because she didn't even know what she was about to say. Dominic watched her carefully, not interrupting, not rushing her. "I don't expect anything," he said. That was new. Sade's brows pulled together slightly. "You don't?" He shook his head once. "No." A small pause. "I decide." The shift in that. Subtle, but real. Sade felt it, the difference, because before, he had wanted something from her, chased it, waited for it. Now, he wasn't asking, and that unsettled her more than anything else. Her fingers brushed lightly against her wrist. A small, grounding movement as she held his gaze. "That's not how this works," she said. Dominic stepped just slightly to the side, not away, just enough to change the angle between them. "It is now." The words didn't challenge her, didn't push, but they stayed, and for the first time, Sade wasn't sure how to respond. It happened in a moment that wasn't meant to stand out. A shift, a movement, nothing obvious. Sade reached for her glass again, not because she needed it, but because she needed something to do with her hands. And that's when it happened. Dominic's fingers closed gently around her wrist. Not tight, not forceful, just enough. Sade froze, not dramatically, not visibly to anyone else. But inside, everything stilled. Her breath caught, soft, sharp. The contact wasn't sudden, wasn't rough. It was deliberate. His thumb rested lightly against her skin, warm, steady, like he had thought about this before doing it. Sade's eyes dropped to where he was touching her, then slowly, back up to his face. Dominic. His name came out quieter than she intended. Not a warning, not quite, more like a question she hadn't finished asking. He didn't let go. "Not immediately." "Still nothing?" he asked. The words were low, controlled, but there was something under them, something deeper. Sade swallowed, her fingers tightening slightly around nothing. "You shouldn't." She stopped, because the words didn't come out right, didn't feel right. Dominic's thumb moved, just slightly, a slow shift against her wrist, and that small movement sent something through her, quick, unsteady. Sade inhaled sharply, her composure slipping for just a second before she caught it again. "This doesn't change anything," she said, but her voice was softer now, less certain. Dominic watched her carefully. I didn't say it did then, but you felt that. Sade's gaze held his, and for a moment she didn't deny it, because she couldn't, and that silence was answer enough. He released her wrist slowly, not abruptly, not carelessly, like he wanted her to remember it, and the moment he let go, Sade felt it, the absence, immediate, noticeable. Her fingers curled slightly, like her body hadn't caught up yet, and that was the problem, because this wasn't just memory anymore. This was happening, right now. The space didn't reset after he let go of her wrist. If anything, it deepened. Sade stayed exactly where she was, her arm lowering slowly to her side, but her awareness still fixed on where his hand had been. She should have said something sharper, something final, something that would push him back into a place she could manage. But the words didn't come, not the way they used to. You always do that, she said instead, her voice quieter now. Dominic's gaze didn't shift. Do what? Act like you already know the answer. A pause. Then, like I don't have a choice in how I feel. Dominic stepped slightly closer, not enough to touch her again, but enough to make the space between them feel intentional. You do have a choice, he said. Sade held his gaze. Then stop deciding for me. Dominic studied her for a second, his expression calm but focused. I'm not deciding anything for you. A beat. I'm just not ignoring what's already there. That hit differently, because it wasn't forceful, wasn't demanding. It was certain. Sade's lips parted slightly, her chest rising a little deeper before settling again. You think this is that simple? She asked. Dominic didn't hesitate. No. A pause. But I think you make it harder than it needs to be. Sade let out a quiet breath, her gaze dropping briefly before returning to his. And you think you've figured it all out? Dominic's voice lowered slightly. I figured out one thing. Her brows pulled together faintly. What? He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her, like he wanted her to sit in it first. Then, that I'm not walking away from you again. That line didn't rush, didn't rise, but it settled deep. Sade felt it, not just as words, but as something heavier, something that didn't leave room for easy dismissal. You don't get to decide that alone, she said, though her voice lacked the firmness it had before. Dominic tilted his head slightly. I didn't say I did. A small pause. Just said I'm not leaving. And somehow that felt even more dangerous, because he wasn't asking her to meet him halfway. He was simply staying. The air between them shifted again, not with movement, not with sound, just presence. Sade became aware of how close he was, not just physically, but in a way that made everything else feel distant, muted, less important. You're different, she said quietly. Dominic didn't deny it. I told you that already. A pause, but you didn't understand it then. Sade's gaze held his, steady, searching. And now, Dominic stepped just slightly closer again, closing the distance without touching her. I don't need you to understand it. That was the shift, clear, undeniable. Before, he had waited, tried to be seen, tried to be chosen. Now, he wasn't asking for that anymore. He wasn't trying to convince her, wasn't trying to earn something from her. He was simply there, certain, unmoved, and choosing her without needing permission. Sade felt it, that difference, because it changed everything. You think that makes this easier? She asked. Dominic's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, then back to her eyes. No, a beat, but it makes it real. Her breath caught lightly, her fingers pressing faintly against the surface beside her again. You're not considering anything else, she said. My family. Victor. Everything that's already. She stopped, because saying it out loud made it feel more fixed than she wanted. Dominic didn't interrupt, didn't dismiss it. He just listened. Then, I've considered all of it. Sade frowned slightly. And? A pause. Then, I still came back. That. Left no space, no gap to question, no uncertainty to hold on to. Sade's chest tightened slightly, her composure still there, but no longer effortless. Because this wasn't just attraction anymore. It wasn't just memory. It was a decision. His. And now, it was forcing one from her. Her gaze dropped for just a second before lifting again, her voice quieter now. This doesn't end well. Dominic's expression didn't change. Maybe a small pause. Or maybe you've just been choosing the wrong version of it. That line lingered, because part of her understood it, even if she didn't want to. And standing there, this close, feeling the weight of him, the steadiness of his presence, the quiet intensity in the way he looked at her. Sade realized something she hadn't prepared for. This wasn't something she could dismiss anymore. Not easily, not safely. And the longer she stayed in this moment, the harder it was becoming to pretend she didn't feel it. She shouldn't still be standing there. That thought came first, clear, immediate, familiar. Everything about this situation had already crossed too many lines, too many expectations, too many rules she had spent years learning how to follow, how to respect, how to never question out loud. And yet, she hadn't moved. Dominic was still in front of her, closed, steady, unshaken. And the worst part? He wasn't the one making this difficult anymore. She was. Sade inhaled slowly, her chest rising just enough to remind her she was still in control, or at least supposed to be. "This doesn't make sense," she said, though her voice didn't carry the certainty it once did. Dominic didn't respond, didn't interrupt. He just watched her. And that made it harder, because if he had pushed, if he had insisted, if he had tried to convince her, she would have known exactly how to respond. She would have shut it down, redirected it, put him back where he belonged. But he didn't. He just stayed. And now, the decision wasn't his anymore. It was hers. Sade's fingers curled slightly against her palm, her gaze dropping for just a moment before lifting again. "You're not thinking about what this does," she said. "My family. Victor. Everything that's already in place." Her voice slowed, not because she didn't know what to say, but because saying it out loud made it feel heavier, more real. Dominic didn't deny it, didn't argue. "I am," he said. That answer should have helped, should have grounded the situation in something logical, but it didn't, because it meant he knew, and he still chose this. Sade shook her head slightly, her composure slipping just enough to be felt. "That doesn't make it better." Dominic's gaze didn't move. "I didn't say it would." A pause settled between them, and this time it wasn't about tension, it was about truth. Sade looked at him again, really looked, taking in everything she had, tried to keep at a distance, the way he stood, the way he spoke, the way nothing about him felt uncertain anymore. And that was what made this so difficult, because her logic, it was clear, simple, uncomplicated. This was wrong, not just inappropriate, not just inconvenient, wrong. Everything about her life had already been structured around a different outcome, a different path, a different man. Victor, stable, approved, expected. And Dominic, he didn't fit into any of that. He disrupted it, challenged it, forced it into something she couldn't easily control. "This isn't who I'm supposed to be with," she said quietly. The words felt practiced, familiar, but something about them didn't land the way they used to, because even as she said them, her body betrayed her. The way her breath shifted when he moved closer earlier, the way her attention stayed on him, even when she tried to pull it away, the way his touch, just that brief contact, had stayed longer than it should have. Sade closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, her gaze steady, but no longer untouched. "And that's the problem," she added softly. Dominic didn't step closer this time, didn't reach for her again. He just stood there, letting her feel it, letting her sit in it, because now he didn't need to prove anything. She was already there, caught between what made sense and what felt real. And for the first time, Sade didn't immediately choose logic. She hesitated, and that hesitation was everything. Her gaze dropped for a second, her voice quieter now. "I shouldn't be feeling this." Dominic's response came just as calm, then stopped. That wasn't what she expected. Sade looked up at him quickly, something flickering in her expression. "You know it's not that simple." Dominic held her gaze. "I know, but you're still trying to pretend it is." Silence followed, and this time, it didn't feel like something she could escape, because the truth was sitting right there, clear, unavoidable. She felt it, not just attraction, not just memory, something deeper, something that had been there longer than she admitted. And now, it wasn't fading, it was growing. Sade exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly, as her control slipped in a way she hadn't allowed before. "This changes everything," she said. Dominic didn't hesitate. Yeah, no reassurance, no hesitation, just agreement, because they both knew there was no going back to what this used to be, not anymore. And standing there, caught between expectation and desire, logic and something far more dangerous, Sade realized something she hadn't prepared for. This wasn't a situation she could think her way out of, because for the first time in a long time. Her heart wasn't following the rules she had been taught, and that was where the real problem began. Sade didn't expect it to happen so quickly. She thought she had more time. Time to think, time to control whatever this was becoming. But she underestimated one thing: her brother. "You've got to be kidding me." His voice cut through the hallway before she even saw him. Sharp, unfiltered. Sade stopped mid-step, her expression settling instantly into something composed, something controlled. But inside, she already knew what this was about. He stepped into view, his jaw tight. His eyes locked on her with a kind of disbelief that didn't try to hide itself. "That's what you're doing now?" Sade exhaled slowly. "Lower your voice." "No." He shot back immediately. "I won't." The tension between them rose fast, not gradual, not subtle. "You think I didn't see that?" He continued, stepping closer. "You think I don't know what that looked like?" Sade held her ground. "What exactly do you think you saw?" He let out a short, disbelieving breath. "Don't do that. Don't act like this is nothing." Sade's gaze didn't shift. It wasn't anything. That made it worse. Her brother laughed, not amused, not lightly. "Nothing?" he repeated. "That's what you're going with." Sade's fingers curled slightly at her side, but her posture stayed steady. "You're overreacting." His expression hardened instantly. "I'm overreacting because my best friend, comes back after years and starts looking at my sister like..." He stopped, ran a hand over his head. "Like he never left," he finished, quieter now, but heavier. Sade swallowed, just slightly. "That's not your decision to make," she said. His eyes snapped back to hers. "No, it's not a beat, but it is my place to say something when it crosses a line." Sade's brows pulled together faintly. "And what line is that?" He stepped closer, not aggressive, but firm. "The one where you forget who he is?" That landed. Sade held his gaze. "I haven't forgotten anything." Her brother shook his head slowly. "Yes, you have." A pause. "He's my friend." The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Sade's expression didn't break. "And I'm your sister." Another pause. He let out a quiet breath. "Exactly." And somehow that made it worse, because to him, this wasn't just complicated. It was betrayal. "And what?" Sade asked, her voice quieter now. "You expect me to ignore everything because of that?" Her brother didn't hesitate. "Yes." The answer came too fast, too certain. Sade blinked once, caught off guard by how simple he made it sound. "You don't get to say that," she said. He stepped back slightly, shaking his head. "No, you don't get to act like this doesn't affect me." Silence followed, heavy, unresolved, because for the first time, this wasn't just about her, and that made it harder. It didn't take long for it to reach them. It never did. Sade walked into the sitting room the next evening, already sensing it before a single word was said. The atmosphere was too still, too arranged. Her mother sat upright, composed as always, her hands resting neatly in her lap. Her father stood near the window, his posture straight, his attention fixed somewhere outside, but not really. They knew. Sade. Her mother's voice was calm, too calm. Sade stopped. "Yes?" A pause, measured. "We'd like to understand what happened yesterday." There it was. Not an accusation, not directly, but something worse. Controlled concern. Sade stepped further into the room, her expression neutral. Nothing happened. Her father turned slightly now, finally looking at her. "That's not what we've been told." Sade's jaw tightened just slightly. "Then maybe what you've been told is inaccurate." Her mother's gaze softened, but not with warmth, with something else. "Disappointment." "That's not how this works," she said gently. Sade frowned faintly. "How what works?" Her mother leaned forward just slightly. "We don't ignore things that could affect your future." There it was again. Future. Sade let out a quiet breath. "My future isn't being affected." Her father stepped in this time. "It is when you allow distractions." Distractions. That word sat wrong. Sade crossed her arms lightly. "Dominic is not a distraction." Silence. And then her father's voice, calm but firm. "He is exactly that." Sade felt something tighten in her chest. "That's not for you to decide." Her mother's tone softened again. "Everything about your life is something we've guided carefully." A pause. "We've always known what was best for you." Sade shook her head slightly. "No. You've always decided what was best." That shifted the room. Her father's expression didn't change, but something in his stance did. "Be careful," he said quietly. Saad held his gaze. I am. Her mother exhaled softly. Said, this isn't about control. Said let out a small, almost disbelieving breath. It always is. Her mother's voice lowered just slightly. Victor is a good man. There it was. The anchor, the expectation, the direction. Saad's gaze dropped for a second before lifting again. That doesn't mean he's the right man for me. Her father stepped forward now, just slightly. It means he is the man we have chosen. Silence. And this time, it didn't feel like something she could push back against easily, because this wasn't just pressure anymore. This was positioning, and she was right in the center of it. Victor didn't confront her immediately. He waited, which somehow made it worse. Saad noticed him before he spoke. Of course she did. The way he approached wasn't rushed, wasn't emotional. It was measured, planned. You left early yesterday. His voice came from beside her, calm, even. Saad didn't turn right away. I wasn't aware. I needed permission to stay. Victor stepped closer. Not enough to invade her space, but enough to make his presence clear. You don't. A beat. But it's something I would have liked to know. Saad turned then, meeting his gaze. There wasn't anything to explain. Victor studied her, not like Dominic, not with intensity, not with curiosity, with calculation. I prefer clarity, he said. Saad held his gaze. And I prefer autonomy. That should have ended it. Clean, balanced. But Victor didn't step back. I've always respected that about you, he continued, his tone unchanged. Your independence. Saad didn't respond. But independence, he added, works best when it aligns with stability. There it was, subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. Said's brows pulled together slightly. And what does that mean? Victor's gaze didn't shift. It means certain actions create unnecessary attention. Saad let out a quiet breath. You mean Dominic? Victor didn't deny it. I mean anything that disrupts what's already in place. Saad's fingers brushed lightly against her arm, grounding herself. And what exactly is in place? Victor's expression remained steady. You and I. Simple. Direct. Said's lips pressed together briefly. That hasn't been decided yet. Victor tilted his head slightly. Hasn't it? A pause followed. And in that pause, there was no warmth, no uncertainty, just expectation. Said felt it, the weight of it, the quiet assumption that this was already settled. You're assuming a lot, she said. Victor's response came just as calm. I don't assume. I move based on what makes sense. That line sat differently because it didn't leave room for her feelings, only outcomes. Said held his gaze, something tightening beneath her composure. And if what makes sense to me is different? Victor didn't hesitate. Then you haven't fully considered the consequences. There it was, not loud, not aggressive, but clear, and for the first time, Said saw it. Not just control, possession. The conversation should have ended there. It should have stayed contained, polite, manageable, but Victor didn't step away. Instead, he reached for her hand, not abruptly, not forcefully, but without asking. His fingers closed around hers. Firm, deliberate. Said stilled, not because she couldn't move, but because the gesture wasn't gentle. It was claiming. You're overthinking this, he said, his thumb pressing lightly against her hand. Saad looked down briefly at where he held her, then back up at him. I don't think I am. Victor's grip didn't loosen. If you were, you'd see that everything we've discussed, everything our families have aligned on, works, not feels right, not makes sense emotionally. Just works. Said slowly pulled her hand free, not sharply, not aggressively, but deliberately. This isn't a contract, she said quietly. Victor's expression didn't change, but it is an arrangement. That word shifted something deeper. Saad's gaze hardened slightly. I'm not something to be arranged. Victor took a small step closer, not enough to intimidate, but enough to press. You're part of something bigger, he said. Saad exhaled slowly, her chest tightening just slightly. And that means I don't get a choice? Victor's voice remained calm. You have a choice. A pause. But not all choices are equal. That was the truth of it. Not hidden, not softened, just placed in front of her. Said looked at him, really looked this time. And for the first time, she saw the difference clearly. Dominic made her feel. Victor made her comply. The contrast was sharp, unavoidable. And suddenly, standing here, facing him, hearing the way he spoke, the way he positioned everything like it had already been decided, Sade felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before: resistance. "This isn't going to work if you keep deciding things for me," she said quietly. Victor's gaze didn't soften, didn't shift. "It will," he replied. A pause. "Then, because eventually you'll understand that I'm right." Silence followed. And this time, it wasn't just tension, it was warning. Because something about the way he said it didn't feel like confidence. It felt like certainty, and that was far more dangerous. The night felt heavier than usual, not louder, not different on the surface, but something in the air. Pressed, Sade stepped out onto the terrace, the cool air brushing against her skin, grounding, or at least trying to. She needed space, distance, something that didn't feel controlled. But even here, she couldn't escape it. "You always come out here when you're thinking too much." She didn't turn, didn't need to. "You followed me," she said quietly. Dominic's footsteps slowed behind her. "I knew you'd be here." A pause. Sade exhaled slowly, her hands resting lightly against the railing. "You shouldn't be." Dominic stepped beside her now. "Not too close." "Not yet. You've said that before." Sade's jaw tightened slightly. "That doesn't make it less true." Silence settled between them. Not empty, not uncertain, full. Dominic looked at her, really looked. "You're avoiding me." Sade let out a quiet breath. "I'm managing a situation." He shook his head once. "No. You're avoiding what you already know." That hit. Sade turned then, finally facing him, her expression controlled but no longer untouched. "And what exactly do you think I know?" Dominic didn't hesitate. "That this isn't over." Her breath caught, just slightly, and she hated that he noticed. The space between them shifted again, closer now, tighter. Sade held his gaze, her composure still there, but thinner, stretched by everything that had built up to this moment. "You don't get to decide that," she said. Dominic stepped closer. This time, there was no distance left to pretend didn't matter. "I'm not deciding anything," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to." That changed it. Sade's brows pulled together slightly. "Asking me to what?" Dominic's voice lowered, not softer, just deeper. "To be honest." Silence. Her chest rose slowly, her breathing no longer steady, no longer controlled the way it had been. "This isn't about honesty," she said. Dominic didn't move, didn't step back. "Yes, it is." A beat. "Because you keep saying one thing, another, and feeling something else." Sade's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. "Because he wasn't wrong." And that was the problem. Dominic took one last step closer, close enough now that the space between them felt charged. "Tell me to walk away." The words landed quietly, but they held everything. Sade's breath caught, her body went still. Dominic didn't look away, didn't soften. "Say it," he continued, his voice steady. "Say you don't feel anything, and I'll go." Silence, and this time it stretched, long, heavy, unavoidable. Sade's chest rose again, her breathing uneven now, her fingers tightening slightly at her sides. She could say it. It would be easy, simple, final. All she had to do was lie. But standing there, looking at him, feeling everything she had tried to control, finally pushed to the surface, she couldn't, and that silence was louder than any answer. The silence didn't break. It deepened. Sade could feel it, that moment stretching between them, tightening with every second she didn't answer. Her breathing had changed now, not steady, not controlled. Dominic didn't move, not away, not closer. He just waited, and that made it worse, because the decision wasn't his anymore. It was hers. Sade's lips parted slightly, her chest rising again, as she tried to steady herself. "You're putting me in a position I didn't ask for," she said, her voice quieter now. Dominic's gaze didn't shift. "You've been in this position." That landed because it was true. She just hadn't faced it. Sade shook her head faintly, her eyes dropping briefly before lifting again. "This isn't how things are supposed to go." Dominic took a step closer, slow, measured. "Then tell me how they're supposed to go." Her breath caught again, because she didn't have an answer, not one that still made sense. Dominic's hand lifted, not abruptly, not forcefully, slow, deliberate. His fingers brushed lightly against her cheek. Sade stilled completely. The contact was soft, careful, but it wasn't uncertain. Her eyes closed for just a second. Just enough to feel it, and that was all it took, because the moment her body leaned into it, even slightly, everything shifted. Dominic's hand stayed there, his thumb moving just barely against her skin, and then he leaned in, not rushed, not aggressive, just certain. Sade's breath hitched sharply, her fingers curling slightly as her body reacted before her thoughts could catch up. This was it, the line, and they were right on it. For a second, she didn't stop him. That was the truth. She didn't move away, didn't pull back. Her body stayed exactly where it was, her breathing uneven, her mind struggling to catch up with what she was about to let happen. Dominic was close now, too close to ignore, too close to pretend this wasn't real. Her hand lifted slightly, not to push him away, but not to pull him closer either. Just there, caught. Dominic. His name came out softer than she intended. Not a warning, not quite. More like a pause, and that was enough, because Dominic stopped. Not completely, but just enough. His forehead hovered close to hers, his breath steady even as the tension between them wasn't. "Say it," he murmured again, quieter this time. Sade's chest rose sharply, her fingers trembling just slightly now, because she knew what he meant, and she still couldn't say it. She stopped, her voice catching. This wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about what she felt. It was everything. Her family, Victor, the expectations she had lived inside for years. And suddenly, it all crashed in at once. Sade stepped back, quick, not dramatic, but enough. The distance snapped between them. Her breath came faster now, as she looked at him. Something in her expression no longer controlled. "I can't," she said. "Not I don't want to, not this is wrong, just I can't." Dominic didn't move, didn't chase, but something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not frustration, something quieter, heavier. "Yeah," he said, and that one word carried everything she hadn't been able to say. Silence followed, but this time it didn't feel like tension. It felt like something had broken, because they both knew. That moment, it didn't disappear. It just stopped, right before it changed everything. And somehow, that made it worse. Sade didn't sleep that night. Not really. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. The way he looked at her, the way he stopped, the way she said, "I can't," and somehow, that moment stayed louder than everything else. By morning, she told herself she needed distance, clarity, something that made sense again. But what she found instead was Dominic. He was already there when she arrived, standing near the far end of the office floor, his posture calm, his attention fixed on something in his hand. A file. Sade slowed slightly as she approached. "You're here early." Dominic didn't look up immediately. "I've been here a while." Something in his tone felt different. Sade frowned faintly. "What is that?" Dominic finally looked at her, and for the first time since he came back, there was no softness in his expression. "Something you should see." He handed it to her. Sade hesitated for a second, then took it. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the next, her brows pulled together. "What is this?" Dominic's voice stayed even. "Records." A pause. "From when I left." Sade looked up at him, confused. "I don't understand." Dominic stepped slightly closer, not invading, not pressing, but present. "I didn't just leave because I wanted to." That shifted something immediately. Sade's grip on the file tightened slightly. "What do you mean?" Dominic held her gaze. "For years, every deal I tried to close," a small pause, "every investor that backed out last minute, another, every opportunity that disappeared right before it worked." He didn't rush the words, didn't dramatize them, because he didn't need to. They weren't accidents. Silence. Sade blinked once, then again. "What are you saying?" Dominic didn't hesitate. "I'm saying someone was blocking me." The words landed clean, direct. Sadie shook her head slightly. "That doesn't make sense." Dominic's expression didn't change. "It does when you see who was behind it." He reached for the file again, turned it slightly, pointed. Sade followed his hand, and then she saw the name, Victor Halacrest. Her breath caught, sharp. "No." The words slipped out before she could stop it. Dominic didn't react, didn't soften it. "Yes." Sade's eyes moved quickly over the page again, then the next, then back. This could be anything. she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. Dominic shook his head once. It's consistent, too consistent. Sade's chest tightened, her thoughts scrambling to catch up with what she was seeing. This doesn't prove intent. Dominic's gaze didn't move, no, a beat, but it proves interference. And suddenly, things didn't feel as clean as they used to, because if this was true, then Dominic hadn't just struggled. He had been stopped, and not by chance. Sade closed the file slowly. Her fingers didn't feel steady anymore. That still doesn't explain everything, she said. Dominic watched her carefully. It explains enough. Sade looked back up at him, her expression tightening. No, you're missing something. Dominic tilted his head slightly. Like what? Sade exhaled slowly, trying to piece it together. If this was happening, a pause. Then why didn't you come to us? Dominic didn't answer immediately, and that silence felt heavier than anything he could have said. Dominic, she pressed, quieter now. He looked at her, really looked. I tried that. Hit. Sade's brows pulled together. What do you mean? Dominic's voice stayed calm. I reached out. A pause, more than once. Sade shook her head slightly. That's not possible. My parents would have... She stopped, because even as she said it, something didn't sit right. Dominic didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. They never responded, he continued. Sade's chest tightened again. That doesn't make sense. Dominic took a slow breath. It does if someone made sure it never reached them. Silence. Sade stared at him, trying to reject it, trying to find something that made more sense. But her mind was already connecting pieces she hadn't questioned before. The timing, the distance, the complete silence after he left. No, she said again, but this time softer. Dominic stepped closer, just slightly. I didn't disappear, Sade. Her name in his voice felt different now. I was pushed out. That word settled deep. Pushed. Not by circumstance, not by failure, but by design. Sade's fingers tightened around the file again, her thoughts racing. And you're saying Victor did this? Dominic didn't hesitate. Yes, and he made sure I stayed away from here. Sade's breath slowed, uneven now, because this wasn't just about business anymore. This was about her family, her life. And suddenly, everything felt like it had been arranged long before she realized it. Sade didn't go to Dominic after that. Not immediately. She went home. The file was still in her hand when she walked into the house. Her steps steady, but only on the outside. Inside, nothing felt stable anymore. Her parents were in the sitting room, exactly where they usually were, exactly how they always looked, composed, untouched. For a second, Sade just stood there, watching them, trying to reconcile what she had just seen with who they had always been. Sade. Her mother noticed her first. A small, controlled smile. Is everything all right? That question felt different now. Sade stepped forward slowly. Did Dominic ever reach out to you? The shift was immediate, not loud, not obvious, but there. Her father's posture stilled slightly. Her mother's expression paused for just a fraction too long before settling again. Why are you asking that? Her father said. Sade didn't move. Just answer the question. A pause, measured, careful. Her mother spoke first. He tried to contact us, yes. The words landed, heavy. Sade's chest tightened, and her father stepped in this time. It wasn't appropriate to engage. Sade blinked once, slowly. Not appropriate. Her voice didn't rise, but something in it changed. Her father's tone stayed even. He was young, unstable in direction. It wasn't a serious proposition. Sade stared at him. Proposition? Her mother exhaled softly. He was asking for support, access, introductions, a pause, and given the circumstances, it wasn't something we encouraged. Sade's fingers tightened around the file. So you ignored him? Her father didn't hesitate. Yes. That cut deeper than she expected, because it wasn't hidden, wasn't denied. It was accepted. And you knew, Sade said slowly, her voice quieter now, that something was happening to him. Her parents didn't answer immediately, and that silence was answer enough. Sade let out a small breath, something in her chest tightening in a way she couldn't control anymore. You knew he was being blocked. Her mother's gaze softened slightly, not with guilt, with reasoning. We knew he was struggling, she said. That's not the same thing. Saad replied. Her father stepped forward just slightly. It is when the outcome is the same. Saad shook her head. No, it's not. Because this wasn't just about business. This was about choice. They had seen it, known it, and decided it didn't matter. You let it happen, she said. Her mother's tone lowered. We allowed things to take their course. That phrasing felt calculated. Said laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. You let him fail. Her father's expression didn't shift. We prioritized stability, and just like that, everything became clear. Not messy, not complicated, deliberate. Said stood there, looking at them. Really looking this time, and for the first time in her life. She didn't see protection. She saw control. And Victor? The question came out before she could stop it. Her parents didn't respond immediately. Said took a step closer, her pulse louder now, her thoughts sharper. Was he part of that too? Her father exhaled slowly, not defensive, not surprised. Victor is aligned with us. That wasn't an answer. Said's gaze hardened. That's not what I asked. Her mother spoke this time. Victor has always understood the value of structure, of growth, of strategic positioning. The words sounded familiar, too familiar. Saji's grip on the file tightened again. And what does that mean for him? Her father met her gaze directly. It means he will be a strong addition to this family. A pause. Not just personally, he added. That shifted everything. Said's breath slowed, dangerously. Not just personally? Her mother leaned forward slightly. The merger of families strengthens influence, expands reach. Merger. The word echoed. Said felt something cold settle in her chest. This isn't about me, she said. Her father didn't deny it. It's about what comes with you. Silence. And suddenly, everything made sense. Victor's calm, his certainty, the way he spoke, like things were already decided. It wasn't just confidence. It was calculation. He's not just marrying me, Said said slowly. Her voice felt distant now, like she was hearing it from somewhere else. He's positioning himself. Her mother didn't respond. Her father didn't correct her, and that confirmed it. Said's chest tightened, her mind racing through every interaction, every conversation, every moment she had dismissed as normal. He wants control, she said. Her father's voice remained calm. He wants alignment. Sade shook her head slowly. No, he wants access. And for the first time, her parents didn't immediately respond, because that part they hadn't fully admitted, but it was there. And suddenly, Saad wasn't standing in a life that had been carefully built for her. She was standing in something that had been arranged around her, something that used her to build something else. And Dominic? He hadn't just been pushed out. He had been removed to make space. Sade inhaled sharply, her composure finally cracking just enough to feel it. You chose all of this, she said. Her father's response came without hesitation. Yes, and that was the final piece, because now there was no confusion, no misunderstanding, just truth, and it changed everything. Said didn't stay in that room much longer. She couldn't. The air felt too tight, too controlled, too decided. Every word her parents had said still echoed in her head, but now it sounded different, clearer, sharper. This was never about her happiness, never about what she wanted. It was about what she represented, what she could secure, what she could give. Said stepped out of the house, the cool air hitting her face as she exhaled slowly. For a second, she just stood there, trying to steady herself, trying to think. So this is what it is, she murmured under her breath. Not confusion, not denial, understanding. Her hand tightened slightly at her side as something settled deep in her chest. Not fear, not hesitation, decision. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like it belonged to her. She didn't go back inside, didn't call anyone. She already knew where she needed to be. Dominic was exactly where she expected him to be. He looked up the moment she approached, and this time there was no distance between them. Said didn't slow down, didn't stop to think. She walked straight up to him. I know. The words came out steady, certain. Dominic's expression shifted slightly. What do you mean? Saad held his gaze. My parents. Victor. Everything. A pause. They knew. They let it happen. Dominic didn't react with surprise. Not fully. But something in his eyes tightened. I figured, he said quietly. Said stepped closer. Not hesitant. Not unsure. And he's not just trying to marry me, she continued, Her voice sharper now. He wants control. Access. Everything that comes with my name. Dominic's jaw tightened. That calm composure shifted. He's not getting it. The words came out low, firm. Not a suggestion. Not a possibility. A decision. Sade searched his face for a second. You sound very sure. Dominic stepped closer, closing the last bit of space between them. I am. A pause. Then, I didn't come back to watch someone else take what's mine. That line hit. Not because it sounded possessive, but because of how he said it. Not ownership. Not control. Conviction. Sade's breath caught slightly. Her voice softer now. And what exactly is yours? Dominic didn't hesitate. Silence. But this time, it didn't stretch. Because Sade didn't pull back, didn't argue, didn't deflect. She stepped into him, and then she kissed him. Not slow, not unsure, certain. Like everything she had been holding back, finally gave way all at once. Dominic didn't hesitate, didn't question it. His hand came up instantly, steady at her back, pulling her just close enough to feel the shift completely. The kiss deepened, not rushed, but undeniable. Every second of tension, every moment of restraint, every word left unsaid, collapsed into that one moment. Sade's fingers tightened slightly against him, her breath uneven as she leaned into it fully this time. No hesitation, no distance, just truth. When they finally pulled back, her forehead rested lightly against his, her breathing still unsteady. This is a bad idea, she whispered. Dominic didn't move away, didn't loosen his hold. Yeah, he said quietly. A pause. But I'm not walking away. Sade let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. You never do. Dominic's gaze held hers. No, a beat. I didn't build everything I have just to stand back now. His hand remained steady against her, grounding, protective. No one is making decisions for you anymore, he added. That meant more than anything else, because it wasn't just about love. It was about choice. And this time, she had it. Sade didn't go back to what was waiting for her. Not the expectations, not the arrangement, not the version of her life that had already been decided. For the first time, she chose differently, not because it was easy, not because it made sense on paper, but because it was hers. And standing there, looking at Dominic, feeling the certainty in him, the steadiness, the way he never once tried to control her, only stood beside her. She understood something clearly. Love wasn't supposed to feel like obligation. It wasn't supposed to feel like alignment or strategy or something you learn to accept over time. It was supposed to feel like this real, unavoidable, chosen. Sade exhaled slowly, her hand finding his again. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to, and this time she didn't let go. So tell me, if you were in her position, would you have chosen love or stayed where everything was already decided for you? Drop your answer in the comments. I really want to know what you would do. And if you felt this story, if you understood the weight of that choice, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Miss Wink Stories, because the next one, it might hit even closer than this one.